I feel like I'm on a roll this today, so I'm gonna make a new episode. And I want to connect this to something I said in the last episode. And it it's appropriate with the title of the podcast, The Moving Standpoint. And also I think it speaks to The I Thou by Martin Buber and the distinction between an I Thou relationship to otherness or to the world or another person. And also it's kind of I think this also is fundamental to the question of what philosophy essentially is about and practicing it and being engaged in it. I think that's fair to say. Um, so I'm going to read something that speaks to this. Um, and this maybe is a connection here to, yeah, I think also to connect it to the notion of the symbol as I was sp speaking to the last episode. It's also in the symbol is also you can call it a symbol. No, sorry, a vehicle to show something of meaning, and also it can act um as a tool for orienting um thoughts into coherence conception. So it can transfer knowledge from one position. If I, for example, I can do this, and probably all people in the world know what this symbol points to. This symbol. I'm struggling to make it like this symbol. And that's the symbol of the cross. So when that is recognized by all, all the people in the world, it immediately, the cross immediately orients you to all your thinking and thoughts about Christianity and religion and all the history of like religious thinking and all the dogmatics and like all the horrific things maybe that's been going on. And it invokes a whole lot of associations in this. So it's a very powerful way to communicate something of significance. Symbol in itself, as I talked about, not in this fashion, but when I used that book, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, in the last episode. So, but the point here in this episode is to go into a more maybe a more technical description of shifting a perspective. Nah, maybe not. Yeah, shifting a perspective of that also a symbol affords. And this is from a book that I really am enjoying, and it's a book from Ryan Dunn's, the author, and is a Jesuit priest and also a professor in uh, philosophy. It's a really great book, and I got I picked it up from yeah, I've mentioned this before, but not in this series. Um, yeah, Guy Sengstock, the founder of Circling, has been having conversations with what inspired Ryan Duns to write about this, from the philosopher William Desmond, and he also did a whole great thing with both Ryan Duns and also William Desmond separately, and also this guy, what's he called again? Stephen Kearney, I think his name is. I might be wrong about the last name, but and he also did the awesome dialectic into dialogos, where they all were, or all four of them engaged in dialectic into dialogos. A brilliant thing, very inspiring. So, but so going back to this context, I'm going to read something from his book, Randon's Spiritual Exercises, where he, at the current page I'm at, he is using Charles Taylor. I don't know who is. I think he's probably a philosopher, but he uses him to get us. I've heard this. I haven't read it through, so he's going to use Charles Taylor to to as a approach to William Desmond's metaxological philosophy. So, but I think that this is might be helpful also to get into how to transfer knowledge in a more embodied way. Um, so, and how we can participate in that process of realizing relevance in the thing or in the context or situation and the world that's where we find ourselves. And this is like, yeah, we can read books about it, like I'm doing a lot. But there's also a sense of to embody knowledge in a deeper sense. It's also a question of the quality or the feeling of an idea. And the practice of what is often referred to as Lectio Divina, or the more secular name, sacred reading. And what that entails is it's about slowing down and really savoring the words as you read them, and tasting them as they percolate through your psyche and downwards or upwards, and how the experience of words and the texture of them might, if you're receptive enough, or if you have trained yourself like with meditation, yoga and stuff, you can start to sensitize yourself and be more receptive, or to use Desmond's word, porous. And so yeah, I think that's enough on that topic. And so I'm gonna, this language at first glance can feel technical, but it's a richness to it, especially if you're, we can use the other symbol that I used, like the what might be, notice I want to connect the flame, the symbol of the flame, to this. I'm not sure if that's possible right now, but I think, yeah, I think it is. It's the quality of the flame, I think, and how it shows up can be an exemplar to what Ryan Dunn's is speaking about in a more technical way. But the affect and effect of the process that he's talking about is really, I think, is appropriate to what's going on beneath the beneath the content, but the context of the process. I'm gonna using randoms. The context of the process is telling and that in his technical language right now, he's speaking about the process of the possibilities of opening of insights and yeah, not sure if that made sense, but hopefully. First, he takes an example. I'm just gonna frame it first, and it takes. Oh no, my Kindle. Ironic. So there's a kind of a disagreement between two positions that we often can see in politics. Like there's a polarization, and they don't agree. Basically, politics, and he makes a distinction between what he calls a apodictic approach, and that's an argument that politicians thoroughly do. They say that X is false, and X also as a symbol. X can mean anything. We have that from mathematics and different other contexts. X is false and Y is true. Typical. We get stuck in this, yeah, I'm right and you're wrong. And we have to we have to agree to disagree. That's where some conversation just halts. And we are used to that. Of course, in a more broader context, you can also see how this relates to escalation and war, basically. If there's not a diplomat who have very good skills in this um, ad hominem approach to problem solving and conversations, and that's what I'm gonna talk about. So I'm gonna start here. Are we doomed to skepticism or to agreeing to disagree? No, not if we engage in ad hominem reasoning with an openness to making some sort of modification to one's own position. And Taylor offers 3 examples to show how reasoning in transition can work. Reasoning in transition, and that's transition I was talking about, also the transition of knowledge or knowledge in a broad sense can work. So example A. So the Y, the letter Y, or the symbol Y, not VHI, but the metaphor I, can be shown to make a better sense of difficulties internal to X than X can. To make an example out of this, if you're struggling with something and you talk to a friend and maybe you've been stuck in the framing of a certain situation and you're kind of ruminating, thinking about it. And you talk to a good friend who knows you, and he can say like, yeah, but I think your framing is kind of off in this. Maybe if you frame it like this, and you get this relevance realization about like, yeah, oh, I haven't thought about that, because you're in a kind of a internal conflict, and maybe your heart is kind of saying one thing and your mind is going on and like, oh, it's all his fault or whatever. So, and of course, we can never step out of, we can't take our eyes and pull them out and, oh, I can see we're always closer to our own reality. Always. And that's, to use the symbol of the flame, it can withdraw, like our perception is so close sometimes that we can't see it. And that's why to use language and communication and training our skills in that is helpful. So we can also help others to reframe, or if they're asked, if they ask for it, or yeah, I think I'm getting hopefully my point across. And so that's the first example of how the ad hominem reasoning is useful. So example B, Y can be shown to present a development that cannot be explained in X terms. Again, to use a good friend as an example, if you have words or terms or concepts um, that you have gained, for instance, reading about it or heard it or listening to it. I'm thinking of an example that can be useful. Okay, so Y can be shown to present a development that cannot be explained in X terms. So if you go to psychologist that has good skills in it's a difficult example. I have to simplify it. Okay, let's try this. if you have a can't think of anything. I'm going to use myself an example. Of course, I'm making this podcast is an example. Um, so if I got a comment on publishing this this podcast, and and that I wasn't aware of something I said or something, or I was unclear, and maybe there was a development in that series, in my series, that could be better explained from the X, or from X as a whoever. It's that I wasn't aware about the possibility that Y could present for me a development in some direction. But since I'm new to this thing of making podcast, I might not have the term, or the term that can spark some kind of new development in how this podcast can kind of be useful in some fashion. Not very happy with that example, but the point was that Y can be shown to present a development that cannot be explained in X's terms. It's kind of, yeah, that's example B. And coming to a conclusion in example C, combining these two examples that I spoke to, it is a transition from the X to the Y is shown to be error reducing through the removal of a contradiction, or overcoming of a confusion, or the recognition of hitherto ignored relevant factor. And I think it's fair to say that this really speaks to the possibility of ad hominem awareness in our encounters with in being, basically. So we have a possibility to orient ourselves to this unfolding sense of reality in a very practical and useful way. It's not an abstract thing to be able to word our experience. It's a very concrete and a very useful way to engage ourselves with others' experience, with our self experience, and developing connectedness in a more sophisticated way. So I use the term, maybe it's appropriate to take this also into account because I've been using the word, I've been pointing to knowledge and to Verveake uses 4 P's to talk about knowledge as distinct and connected to each other. And connecting this back to the symbol that's can call it a metaphorical sense of communicating knowledge or transferring knowledge, as I used in my example of the cross that contains a whole lot of content, but the context is the cross. So and to use the 4 P's that Verveake has conceptualized in his 4E cognitive science, he uses the 4 P's, and the first P is procedural. No, I'm gonna start in the right order. Propositional, and that's basically theory, books, theories, models. Propositional terms. And that's how we start to. I'm gonna make an example. If you're a doctor, you have to go through several years of knowledge. You have to know about anatomy, biology, everything about biology. But you're not yet a doctor. You have the knowledge, and then you go into training. And so you start to train and develop your procedural skills, procedures. You have to make incisions and learn how to, what's it called, to close up a wound and everything that is involved by being a doctor, procedures. So that's the second P. And the third P is to continue the example of a doctor. The third P will then be, so you have the understanding or the theory, you have the procedure, and then you get into another level that's more like, it's called perspectival knowledge. And the example can be like you're working as a doctor in ER, and you see all this, it's been an accident, and you see all these people lying on the thing, like what you carry people in. And there's a lot of people, and you're like, oh shit, what am I gonna do? Or a war situation might be. And you go in and you have a perspective, and you know you have the procedure and knowledge, and you have the experience. You have some experience, but you're new to the ER and situation. So you have a different perspectives coming at you, and you have to discern who am I gonna help first. So um you get the perspective of, okay, who am I gonna prioritize in this situation? Who's not breathing? Who's bleeding too much and stuff like that. And when you develop this perspectival skills or ways of seeing, you can respond appropriately to through the perspective that you're mm, and you can start to develop this more ontological perspective taking. What do I mean by ontological perspective taking? I say like, maybe that's wrong. I think I'm gonna just disregard that. Perspectival knowledge is just to have an overview, to use the example, and to see how you can respond appropriately and prioritize. It's also a way of, I can say, perspective, like to use a more, maybe a more spatial metaphor is like if you have a room that's filled with stuff, you don't start washing the floor. You have to tidy up first and then you go into washing. But if you have the wrong perspective, you throw you throw water on the on your mess, and it's a it's a silly example, but maybe it's thinking more. If you're gonna learn how to ride a bike, you don't start by throwing yourself into the downhill slope. If you have a perspective, you start by pedaling like we usually do on the grass, and maybe you fall down, but you find your balance, and then you can start thinking long term about, okay, maybe someday you can I can go down that downhill slope and have a more fun. So that's perspectival knowing. And then we can always develop that. To have a envision, like some project, for instance, So now you can see how also the first P, propositional, procedural, learning how to ride a bike, and the long term is becoming a um, world leading cyclist or something like that. And that's the perspective you're having. Like, I'm gonna be the greatest downhill cycling person in the world. So that's three piece of his, and this is, remember, this is all knowledge wastes or different kind of knowledges, but they're of course connected. But they're also useful as distinctions. What do I miss? Do I miss procedural knowledge, or do I need more theory, or do I need more procedural knowledge? And to come to a closing on this third episode of the moving standpoint, I is the 4P, and that's participatory knowledge. And the participatory knowledge is where we usually integrate everything combined, all the previous three P's, and we participate in a context. I want to use, as an example, I want to use a viewpoint of a newly educated psychologist. He has all this previous three. He has done his homework. He knows how to conceptualize pathology and diagnose and make categories out of people's issues. And he has also the perspectival knowledge and the perspective of a lot of modern psychology is like, okay, we're gonna provide him with medical medications and get him the hell out of it, out of here, so he can go back to work and pay his bills, and so we can get him into the workforce and be a good citizen. So we're gonna give him this awesome medicine so he can go back to paying his taxes and be a good citizen. What they don't tell you when to make a little deviation, what they don't tell you when you get this awesome medicine is, yeah, they're also taking away your dignity. They're gonna take away your natural life force energy. They don't tell you that. So that's another story. But to go back to the framing of the meaning crisis, that's a lot of people who get stuck in that position. It's not it's not a hidden thing. We all know this. What to go to the point to this point, the participatory knowledge of a well-educated, newly trained, off the work psychologist and what they gain over time, the good ones who isn't there just to make money of people's misery, what they lack, and it takes a long time to develop this. You have to participate thoroughly and be attentive and really, you know, you have to pay attention to what, to listen, to hearken, and not only look for people's pathology. If you look for pathology, you're going to find pathology. If you look for people's personality or what they're good at, where they're coming from, you might find something else that doesn't fit into your own propositional tyranny of the book you've been reading. So what the four, you can say in that example, the lack of attunement in the hearkening, the listening, that's appropriate when you encounter another people in their pain, maybe in existential pain. If you don't have the depth of attunement, that you built up by participating, you're not going to be attuned enough to really care for the other human being that's sitting right across of you, filled with anxiety or depression or on the brinks of psychosis. If you can't use attunement and care, and be sensitive enough to the other person, you're not gonna be very helpful. Might exaggerate the person's suffering. And that's a very serious thing. I wasn't planning to end up as this serious topic, but that's where it went. And I also have to say that, like, sometimes medications is what we need, and so I'm not undermining that by saying all this, but I also have a criticism about how modernity has, in our accelerated society, has become. I have a lot of criticism about that. And so, but again, I'm not saying that sometimes we need medications. That's for sure. Yeah. So I'm gonna go back to the point in this episode was trying to provide a more technical terms of the usefulness of language, and also the connecting, or the the distinctions between different kinds of knowledge. I'm gonna close by saying the deepest and most real form of knowledge is the participatory. And to make a very clear example, if you go to a position, or to a person that has, like, done this beautiful piece of woodwork, and you ask him, how did you make this? No, I just made it, can say. Or an artist who came up with a beautiful song or something. It's just like, you can't explain how he made it. Maybe it's some parts of it, or like, but he can't. Maybe he didn't read a book. Maybe he didn't, like, know. Maybe he didn't know how to sing. He didn't have a proper education or a classical education, but he just did it. I just did it, people say. I don't know. And what they're actually saying is that they participated whatever the creation they made. It just emerged. But they were participating. Like, you see a child makes kind of plays with Lego or something. All the code, like, trying it out now. I'm gonna, like, trying this. Not to being aware of suddenly it be he has created a house, but just participating with these small things. So that's an example of participatory knowing. It's a very embodied and acted way of doing things. Okay, I think this went on too long, but okay. So I just want to thank you for your attention. And this was the third episode of the moving standpoint that moved into domains that I didn't anticipate. And have a good day. See you next time.